All right, good morning, everybody. Real quick, let's take a look at crude. Not terribly interested. I know yesterday was the day one break from some balance. We just opened up here, so we could get a extreme fade off the lower end and look for that balance to continue to get supported. I'm a little leery of how many times we've been down here, even just in the overnight session, not to mention yesterday. And we do have prior value area low down there. It is at the edge of, there's pretty much nothing on the yearly, quarterly, monthly, in terms of inflection right away. But weekly is attempting to hold prior value. I'm deferring to the composite structure, which is just below that level for that. So that's why we have this bullish level. So coming right down into it here into the open. Tempo pretty high on the open. See the delta, sellers pressing harder than they've pressed all night so far. All right, so the S&P, let's talk about it. For the year, just make this larger here. There's the story, right? So critical time in general is the year. It's going to take days to unfold and show us the answer to this. But are we going to remain rotational like we've seen the year attempt to get into? Or are we just going to pop back up and begin to hold above developing value area? Not a line in the sand, similar to yesterday, not a line in the sand that we're going to lean on today, any level from the year. Quarterly, just rotational with no real interaction with any levels. Probably working towards developing value high, but wouldn't be surprised if it just continue to chop around in these zones here and not really reach either one for a while. Crude with the real selling coming in there. You see that on the tape. S&P for the month, same story as yesterday. Same story as yesterday. Are we going to, I expect some form of a pullback. What we were able to do in the overnight session is go up there and wick monthly VWAP right there. And so now the sellers are starting to take some control. We see that on the weekly as we get to it. So some kind of a pullback is expected on the monthly here. A return pullback into prior value and or kind of this lower return pullback extreme fade into its developing value. Recall that is also dissonant if we get in between these areas, but they're wide enough apart that we could have trade locations. And then you see what I'm talking about on the month, where it's in kind of a slow, the week, excuse me, it's in kind of a slow trend, but then we have this spike up and kind of now it's really rotational against this area. So this recent pullback is to VWAP actually is the kind of upper extreme fade for the week. And to me, it's pretty bearish right now. Not to mention, that is confluent with this attempt overnight to get above the composite structure we were trading in yesterday, to get above yesterday's value and whatnot. And that all fails right here overnight. And this was just a return pullback of that structure, extreme fade of our new weekly developing value area. And so to me, immediate destinations are down here, right? Other side of the structure, other side of weekly developing value. And that puts that main pullback idea underway back to the monthly, where we could go even lower to start to get some tests with some really key inflections. So that's my thoughts on the two markets as we get going here. I will be right back. So that was quite a bit of selling, as we mentioned, in the crude. I would be more excited about what's going on in crude. But just look at this on the weekly here, and it's really, really ugly, guys. Crude is like dying a slow death. I'm not sure. I'm not sure that market's always going to be one that we're looking at trading. But in the meantime, we've just had a failure. Yesterday in the overnight session, attempted to break a multi-day CVA. Strong selling came in. The buyers are strong as well here as we retrace. So it's not like we're getting a very weak pullback. But this is a place we can stalk some short opportunity against that line in the sand, 40.20 composite value high, 40.30 weekly prior value. So that 20 to 30 cent zone is where the thesis is now wrong, but we have had a recent condition shift in that market. All right, just shorted a little there. a little bit of absorption of the buyers into that attempt to keep pressing. Certainly didn't maintain good downside momentum thus far, so might see kind of a what I call a pattern shift here, where it gets back above the two and then holds the two, but there's a bit more of a press. Also, one thing would be important to let you know that was definitely in my mind as I took that entry and was in that was this in general, just this area here, this overnight balance. It's not something I highlighted on the chart, but it's because it's perfectly confluent with the CVA level. We could have easily pushed up there rather than turning here. So that's one of those situations where you take a turn, you understand it makes sense and whatnot. So we're seeing a lack of selling so far on this down move, but you take a turn, you take a trade, but you know that the potential is very real for it to go against you and create the real turn, perhaps from the real trade location. So this is just something you have to always balance as you're considering things. S&P very, very quiet here leading up into the open. Still have 15 minutes, but let's see. Composite value low. It's into here. We could put a limit order. Okay. That was almost like things like it didn't, but it looked like my data skipped there. Look at the delta. See what happened as they pressed into that destination there. So we took 20% off. And I have a almost insane habit of saying we when I'm talking about me. It's mostly because it's a lot of times I'm representing Apteros, and it just sounds better to say we than just me. I do have some support personnel and whatnot, so we. just keep a stop in there and pretty much let that thing loose, see what it can do. One thing I am aware of in this market is if we look at, say, monthly's fine. This is all kind of, to me, one kind of grindy flag, right? So if this really does start to crack, I know right now it's just a return into what we would call, CVA structure. But in general, it's been pretty flaggy here. So, if it cracks, remember we never got that real return pullback down here. So this is still a place we could get to. As the buyers rip it higher, right? All right, let me get my prep in for the ES for the room. So, nothing on the yearly. We got these two marked, which are significant if we could get there in the quarterly. These two are marked, which is my kind of, again, main ideas is that we're perhaps turning here. I mean, we're in open space, right? It's not really different than yesterday. We've just gone a little higher and maybe wicked, monthly VWAP. So not a whole lot that's different, not a massive amount of opportunity. We have reverted overnight back into prior value, back into the CVA structure. I am definitely going to keep an eye on weekly developing value area high, but that's already confluent with that composite structure where it is right now. So really, I'm good to go with the prep and the levels I have. It covers everything I need it to. The question is, do I want to make this a bearish level? And I think the answer is yes. So I'm going to make that a bearish level. Honestly, if a DVA trade location wasn't so bad, I might consider shorting this general slow turn here in the S&P. It's in general a return pullback of prior value within the context of the return pullback which has already occurred of the composite structure. So like I said, I'm bearish that market to get bullish lower, but it's even like a head and shoulders type pattern, but DVA location is not there for me, so I ain't doing it. What is that from? My sister used to say that a couple years ago. I ain't doing it. It's from some meme or something. Yeah, sorry, got the mechanical gamer keyboard. It's pretty obnoxiously loud. So let's talk about order flow and crude oil, right? Um, we held delta neutral, so contextually bearish from this point based on that. Um, as we mentioned, the buying was way stronger than we'd like to see here, right? We still took the trade though, and we got some selling to come in. Unfortunately, most of that selling right there was a late rotation capitulatory type bit of selling. Um, so really, right now, I'm hanging on to narrative. Order flow is contextually bearish, but by no means am I seeing a weakness from the buyers at any point in time during this trade. So short term, you could kind of call it neutral to even bullish, right? There's been actually, in fact, there's been a bit more buying since this point here than there's been selling. So um, order flow doesn't control what I do. It gives me additional color on what's happening. Um, but, I trade mainly based on narrative, acceptance, DVA, rhythm, all these things checked out for that short entry that we're still holding on to, right? Order flow had gone negative, so I am I had a question about crude oil and my prep today, why I wasn't including quarterly developing value area low, which is obviously a factor, right? Recent condition shift there has put us rotational, so that's a place that we're kind of bullish from. Um, and then just below that, barely, essentially confluent, definitely confluent, the same thing, is weekly prior value, right? Well, for me, I'm just deferring to what I have on the existing chart, which is essentially this composite area, right? So I'll give the composite area a little extra room. We might wick it more or something like that. But, that's one of the reasons why you guys saw me put a limit order. Like I may have gotten a low of day fill there. Um, Not quite. Looks like I was a tick off it or something. But that's why I was interested in using a pretty rare thing for me, which is limiting out into an order, into an area. And that's because I know that all those things are stacked into that area, including, monthly VWAP. So that's why I think you saw the order flow react the way it did. That's why I think you've seen the buying reaction. I just think narrative points more towards downside. And in fact, I hate to say it, I think I'm smarter than the order flow in this case, because I think a lot of buyers are coming in off all those references, but I think they don't understand the more recent condition shifts that we've seen and the implications of that. So that's some pretty advanced type order flow meta game considerations there. So be careful with that line of thinking, right? But that's my read right now. But most importantly, that's why I don't have all those levels on my chart, is because if stuff's confluent and if generally, it's, you can defer to some of the lower time frames, or defer to, in this case, a structural area, to say, okay, that's the general line in the sand, and it's taking care of those other references for me. Good question, though. Boy, the S&P is really lethargic here into the open. Definitely some just short-term absorption again we're seeing in crude, similar to what we saw into the last kind of high area. Yeah, a couple things I noticed in the chat worthwhile going over together. As the S&P opens up, one, yes, I'm using Sierra hotkeys, same ones I've used for years. I do have the Stream Deck. Let's see if you can show it to you. Oh gosh. No, I can't. But I don't feel comfortable enough with the way the buttons press on that to use it as a dedicated. I am way faster with, for sure, multiple taps, because a lot of times, for example, in S&P, I'll fire off 4 or 5, 10 lots, just in rapid, succession, and there's no way I could do it as fast as I do it with my keyboard with that Stream Deck thing. So yes, I'm just using the keyboard with Sierra hotkeys. And the other question was, yeah, exactly what I was talking about earlier, with taking the short here in crude, and there's, by the way, no selling on this down move. What were we talking about? Yeah, taking the short here, knowing that the level was higher. Look, you got the acceptance picture, you got enough of rhythm, DVA is imbalanced down, you know, delta neutral is in your favor, you get a decent turn that had a little bit of absorption even for us. It's, within the vicinity, those are trades I'm taking. I know very well, that was a trade that I considered as I was getting in, like, this is probably one I'll scratch instead of take a full stop, because of that very fact, because the real level, the real retest, the even developing value high, even the lower edge of the overnight balance was higher. So crude not looking good right now. right? No selling into this down leg rotation here. And so now we're getting that pattern shift from the 2 that I talked about potentially happening earlier, which didn't. S&P, guys, middle of prior value. Like, yeah. Don't chop up here. Yeah, I think the crude trade might be toast. I'll show you guys a lot of times my breakfast and or snack of choice. You guys ever have these things? Belvita, blueberry, like bar type things. They are delicious. What's nuts, Diedrich? Or are you just telling me that that's what you had for a snack? So the S&P with a pretty sharp order flow reversal there into developing value low, right? Sellers pressed pretty hard on the open. By the way, it's kind of into delta neutral. Buyers have now taken it right back. So just took some more off of crude. It's into the -2. There's no selling. We've given it ample room to breathe and room to misbehave. So we're now 40% out of that. And as of late, crude and the S&P have been trading much more in step with each other than they should, than is fun, than is great for trading two different markets like this. They've dislocated a bit today and overnight a little bit, but yesterday and whatnot, I noticed that swing high, swing high, swing low, like exact same points. So be right back. The Bay Trader is back. Good to see her. I just added to crude. That is pure momentum add. Just get right back out of it if it can't go in a reasonable fashion. Took off 20% of the ad. Probably going to take off more. Depends on what happens right here. More off. most of the ad off now. Yeah, it's definitely a form of compression. Yeah, hate to have come out of as much of the ad as I can. Not that it wasn't a great scalp into a new low of day, but it just really started to kind of stall out at the -2, right at the composite value low. So now I think it's not bouncing, right, which leads to further downside. But I'm fine with all my decisions. S&P dropping into neutral. Would love to see neutral breakdown in the S&P, prior value breakdown in the S&P, and then we get an imbalance pullback to be a breakout pullback of prior value, and maybe even a delta neutral test from below. Hello, crude. Still need to note the weak selling. Now I'm entirely out of the added short from the most recent swing high. So playing for chump change. S&P holds neutral. Buyers come right back in. Hey, it seems to be really choppy in this area. I wonder why. Oh, it's because of this. So, with your order flow read, let's give you a day one advanced lesson compared to what we were taught yesterday. You might look at this and think, from this low here, order flow is up higher, but price is really been lower to kind of the same. And that could be construed as absorption. Even just looking at these last two rotations, you could say, okay, buying has brought us higher to this current swing high than the prior one, but price is much lower, so that's absorption. And you would be incorrect on that. There are these things that we call false divergences, And what you really have to look out for is the fact that the only reason delta is in general higher, whether it's throughout this sequence or the most recent two sequences, is because of the lack of selling, not because of the, you know, really, strong buying. There has been a little bit of absorption of the buyers. It's happened in a few spots, which helps, but in general, there's been no selling on the down legs. Just one bar of selling on the down leg, right? Even this one that worked pretty well and had some selling, it was almost just one bar type capitulation into the low. So back at delta neutral again. One thing some of the astute amongst you may have noticed is you'll see me just move the chart a little bit, and sometimes I'll almost like wiggle it. That is just me, for whatever reason. I probably don't even need to do it, but it's an extra confirmation that I have the window highlighted that I might be making hotkey entries and executions on. It's just me like double checking, confirming that's the window you've got selected. So if you start banging in for some size or whatever, you're doing it in the right place. It's not a superstitious wiggle the chart for good luck. No, I don't. I don't really have any thoughts on imbalance down in crude. We're just imbalance down. Lack of sellers, but imbalance down. Narrative playing out, kind of compressing into structural area. What else could we say? More aggressive selling on the tape than we've kind of seen. I would love to be short the S&P. Just nothing good enough to meet kind of selectivity filters. Rhythm was taught as the #1 guide for scale outs, not for targets, but for initial targets. Rhythm is an absolute factor, and DVA is the secondary factor, which they often line up. So here we've seen a sharp bit of buying off continued lack of selling. I really think crude is toast now. I did not expect to be focused on crude today. I was really hoping to get some good trades in the S&P. All right, crude, you've had your time. It's a good run. I did come out of another contract in crude there. All right, S&P. Going to highlight prior value here so we don't forget I gotta change my colors, my charts. I'm not happy with them right now. R. Go to this. There we go. Mucho mejor. Plata o plomo. When I was in New York, I took like a 20-30 minute subway ride with the original blonde-headed DEA agent from Narcos. I forget his name, but him and Javi were working together trying to get Pablo, and he had just broken up with one of the Olsen twins or something. He was telling me about it, and he was going on his first date since then out in Williamsburg, and I was headed out there as well. It was pretty cool. We both had mustaches, and we were both wearing like old school felt, brimmed hats. We were a match made in heaven. All right, you see, crude broke. It was essentially compression can occur on delta as well. We didn't really discuss that, but that's absolutely something that can happen. And so we were compressing into neutral, and there's the pop, those 450 contracts or whatever. They didn't get a whole lot for that effort though. Probably around break even is where I'll exit this trade manually. It's not because break even's there. It's because I'm just letting this hang on. You see buyers continue to press here. Definite passive seller in my favor here. What do we need to see? We need to see some form of a squeeze happen within the next rotation or so. Um, you know, when I'm trading, I really like to see strength weakness in my favor. Absorption is fine and all, but I'm never comfortable when people are slamming things in the opposite direction of my trade. That's not what I typically want to see. I am flat as more buying continues to press up to 817 contracts now. S&P finally, for the first time during the pit session, actually pushed an extreme of prior value close to the trade location I want in extreme fade of the weekly. Crude with the perfect little imbalance pullback there. Just really nice passive seller absorbing that. There comes the reversal. Focused on the S&P. All right, so I am short the S&P. Nothing but buying since I've shorted. Expect this to be a kind of a choppy, messy trade. Get back into the crude short as well. Not a tick in my favor in the S&P so far. This is bound to be a choppier type trade. All right, buyers still pressing the S&P. I wanted to see it not really continue to trade above VWAP there. The VWAP trade location with finally prior value. So if it maybe needed to push more of an extreme, we'll see. I would say that scratching is an incremental edge for me. It's not like a large part of it, but it has shown by doing the same testing that I recommend you guys to do that it does aid, it does increase expectancy for me. There's been plenty of times in my trading where it is not, and I've gone back to saying, stop over managing. You're not, not doing a good job, and you're getting too emotional about things and all that type stuff. But when you have that under control and you are able to really see good kind of short-term skills, what's going on. So crude not dropping since we got in here. There's some more selling. Aggressive re-entry in on the S&P. Tiny stop. Mean reversion type, outside in type plays. Whereas crude is a trade where we're looking for price expansion, continued imbalance. %20 scale. Crude. Out of the S&P again. Uh-oh. Changed the wrong chart. All right, back into the S&P again. Extreme fade on the weekly. We could easily go push, prior value high, but we do have prior value. Excuse me. We could easily go push developing value high. I think I misspoke, but we do have prior value here. B period, creating some potential excess above A period on today's developing profile. All small attempts, small stops here. Not even risking, today's R, 1R on these. Look at the prep chart. Well, we can look at both of them. Crude, S&P. So getting short, a little bit in front of the bear zone based on prior value and whatnot in the S&P. Crude been working shorts because the bull zone was breached and holding on a core position, looking for this the breakdown of neutral SR, but hasn't happened. Not a tremendously positive thing for the short that we couldn't even hold but about one tick below VWAP when we attempted to go down in the S&P. Thought we might have had it nailed there for a moment, but now I'm finger on the trigger to bail on this, and we're out. Tough trade location in the S&P. Definitely, a lot of compromising there with DVA. That's not a proper DVA location and whatnot. Back into the S&P short. I'm probably not going to like how many entries I've taken in the S&P in this location in my review today. I'm definitely getting a sense of that. Sound the alarms for crude. We might see a crack. S&P. Ooh. S&P has had its way with me. Really, it's going to be do or die time right here in this sequence for crude for me. Unable to find those sellers. This thing really needs to crack. I mean, in fact, I could put the stop, somewhere in here. It's not break even plus one, right? Or two, or whatever it is. That is market generated. It's at the point in time for me where seeing lack of selling. Yes, the buyers have been absorbed a bit, but even when we attempt, it just hasn't gone. So all right, so we're out of crude. All right, so I think that's a good time to wrap up the stream. Some much better lessons today and whatnot. I think I may have been a bit too active in the middle of a flat DVA there. A little too cute on the S&P. It is my trade location. It is the where the main idea for the short is for the day, but taking a VWAP trade location like I did maybe initially, where it looks like it wicks VWAP into the area, is one thing. but continuing to execute a few more times in kind of a choppier area is another thing. So I'll be sure and review that.